Environmentalist Ikal Angelei is on the line from Nairobi in Kenya for some insights into what the sticking points stifling a settlement among these countries are. Ikal, good evening and thank you for joining us on The Globe.
Good evening.
Now, Ikal, what are the sticking points in this dispute between the three countries?
I think one of the key things is, for a long time, Ethiopia has been seeking to use a lot of its river water bodies to produce energy. It wants to be one of the biggest producers of energy in the continent. And so it was, when they were building the Renaissance Dam, one of the key things that Ethiopia had to do was to mobilize money, resources internally. So that was one. So there was the ownership. In terms of ownership by citizens, everybody was on board and contributed bonds to actually finance this. But then Egypt has always been talking about the protection of its food security because of the Aswan Dam. And all the countries apart from Ethiopia, Sudan, even Kenya and Uganda have always argued that they want to be able to use the Nile, yet Egypt has been the biggest beneficiary since the first agreement.
Now, in terms of what Egypt is saying with regards to ensuring that their water supply is not disrupted, do they have a valid point? Do you think that Ethiopia will not be able to manage to ensure that the water supply is not disrupted and that the water remains clean and pure?
One of the key things, in one way or another, they have a valid cause of downstream impacts because all the countries use this water. However, I think one of the key things is how the monitoring is done. It's very easy to say we will monitor release rates and river flows. Again, we know the area, especially between Sudan, Ethiopia, and parts of Egypt, actually prone to increasing droughts. Generally sub-Saharan Africa. I think that's one of the worries in terms of what happens during certain times, and that's why the suggestions to only fill it up during July and August, and those are wet seasons, and sometimes into September. So they're looking at filling up processes within the wet seasons, which means that it could take about 20 years to fill it up. But then at what point does Ethiopia start to generate the energy?
Now, on the one hand, Egypt claims that, this dam, the Renaissance Dam, could cause vital downstream reservoirs to dry up. And then on the other hand, Sudan is basically arguing that this will transform the lives of close to 110 million people. How do they meet each other halfway? How do they ensure that an agreement is signed to benefit all three countries or all three nations?
I think there was in the detail. One, it's looking at what are the long-term plans for the dam, because one thing many countries always say it's for hydroelectric power only, but then there are always chances of irrigation. So if then within the agreement it's very clear that no matter who's in power years from now, what sort of irrigation, if any, but then ideally it's for hydropower. But secondly, it's looking at options of what sort of energy can be produced during the filling up process, or while the dam doing runoff, there are options of using hydroelectric power, not necessarily through a dam. You can actually use runoff rivers. There are new technologies that can be used. But the monitoring and measures is very critical, and if it's not taken into account, then in many cases there's a high probability of conflicts coming up. And who then caters for that monitoring process? How do the three countries participate in monitoring throughout the process? But I guess for me, it's not even about only the three countries. It's really looking at the entire Nile process, going back to the Nile Basin Initiative, because you cannot start to about downstream when upstream really begins, totally higher. So I think it's really going deeper into how do they monitor the entire release rates of the river and the river flows, but also looking at climatic changes, because drought has been very high in the region.
Now, the United States and the World Bank have been attending, the meeting as observers, and we saw, Abiy Ahmed, the leader of Ethiopia, in the country, in South Africa, over the last weekend. And he has requested South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa to intervene and ensure that this happens for, this Renaissance Dam takes place, it's constructed and there's agreement and, there's a way forward. They've asked for his intervention. Do you think that in the next meeting that is expected to take place later this month, there will be some sort of agreement going forward for all three parties or all three countries to ensure that they're all comfortable and this benefits all the countries involved with the intervention of South Africa's president?
I think it's definitely going. Nobody wants catch-22 or a possible conflict between Ethiopia and Egypt. That's one thing that everybody is working against. And so there is a likelihood of it. But I think right now with the pressure, as the correspondent indicated, the pressure of it's our dam and the whole nationalist move towards pushing Ethiopia to make an agreement and work for Ethiopia by the citizens is putting much more pressure on the Ethiopian government to look at it more in terms of not a middle ground, but something that favors Ethiopia more than the middle ground.
Ikal, thank you so much for joining us this evening on The Globe. That was environmentalist Ikal Angelei, and she was giving us her insights into the dispute between Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt with regards to the construction or finalization of the Renaissance Dam.